Welcome to Divine Earth School, the place where high achievers and spiritual seekers come to embody, express, and explore their divinity, where I talk all things health, wellness, biz, life, and spirituality. So let's dive in. Hello, 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 Mosaic Souls. Hey, Mosaic Souls, this is Rachael Alexander, artist and Mosaic Soul mentor, aka transformational coach with flair. And today I wanted to come to you for Wellness Wednesday, talking about how to tell the difference between a healthy and a not so healthy carbohydrate. So one of the things that I try to teach my clients is, with our society being so heavily marketed to, where you're being marketed to all the time on what's healthy and what's not healthy. And usually most marketing that's done, especially by major corporations, are not usually in the interest of your best health. I try to give my clients just information to empower you and to help you know how to tell the difference between what to put in your body and what not to put in your body, what fuels your body and what depletes your body, right? And usually that's the difference between the foods that you eat. Certain foods nourish you and give you energy and revitalize you and replenish you and helps your body to repair and heal itself and to thrive, while other foods deplete you and your body has to go through extra things to detoxify from toxins and other additives and substances that are in the foods, right? So let's talk about what unhealthy carb. The simple trick, I just want to say a simple trick, right, is when you think about a carbohydrate, right, you want to think about it in its whole food form, right? And what I mean by that is you want to eat as close to earth as possible. You want to eat as close to the plant as possible, right? So when you think about a carbohydrate, think about it in its whole form, right? So if you go out in nature and you see nature, you don't see that nature produces bread trees. You don't see that nature produces cereal or pasta trees, right? You want to think about the whole, like in the form of grains, right? In the whole grain form, right? So quinoa, brown rice, things that you'll find in the actual nature itself. You want to eat as close to whole plant-based foods as possible when it comes to carbohydrates, right? So carbohydrates are basically made up of vitamins, minerals, and fiber, right? So those are the main three things that carbohydrates are made up of, but not all carbs are good, right? And so usually when you think about a carbohydrate, when it's not really healthy or nutritive to you, it's usually because it's highly processed or refined, right? So let's go back to the grain example, right? When you think about grains, there's a whole grain and then there's a refined grain. Refined grains are basically where they strip off the bran and the bran and the not the endosperm, the bran and the other thing, I can't remember the name of it. This is bran, the endosperm, and the something else. I'm missing one of the other three components of a bran. But basically they strip away like literally almost like 50 to 60, if not more, percent of the actual health of the plant, right? So when you think of like a wheat grain or whatever, right? They should literally strip it away. And so you're left with minimal nutrients, right? So instead of eating white rice or eating white bread or pasta and flour, you want to eat the whole grain, right? If you can do wheat and you can do gluten, right? You can eat the whole wheat thing, or eating quinoa or brown rice. You want to eat the actual whole grain instead of eating the processed grain, because the processed grain has little to no nutrients left in it, right? And a lot of times, especially with these companies trying to produce for high monetary profits, right? They would strip the bran and stuff like that, strip the actual whole grain in order to produce higher profits. But then they would go back, and they still do this actually, they go back and try to enforce, what do they call that? Rachel, my mind, where they try to I can't remember the name. The name is escaping me. But basically where they try to reinforce nutrients that they stripped away from the food, they try to reinforce it, but it never is in the quantity that nature intended for it. And so our bodies don't even necessarily recognize it because it's not in its whole food form, right? So it's better to just eat the whole grain instead of eating the processed or refined grain in the form of grains, right? Now, carbohydrates don't only apply to pastas and breads and cereals and stuff like that. Carbohydrates are each food contains one of the 3 macronutrients. Hello, Miss Just Brittany. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Each of our foods contains one of the 3 macronutrients. We have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, right? So no food is ever just one of the things, right? So when you think of carbohydrates, usually when you think of your pastas and your breads and all your pastries and stuff, that usually contains carbohydrates and fats, right? But if you think of pulses, lentils, beans, and stuff like that, that usually contains protein and carbohydrates, right? So everything has a little bit of each, right? So when I'm talking about carbohydrates, I'm just talking about sort of a food category that we have a tendency to look at as more carby than like more fat density. Like when you think of nuts and seeds, that's more so like protein and fat, right? So it's not necessarily considered a carb, right? So you want to think about your carbs as fruit is also a carbohydrate, and fruit is, I would say, one of the healthiest carbohydrates that you can get, because when you go out in nature, you can pick an apple from a tree and you're not gonna, you know what I mean? You can pick an apple, or you can pick a peach or a pear, or, you know what I mean? Things that you see out in nature, you want to get back to nature, which is why I call Sip of Nature or Divine Earth School. It's all about getting back to nature, getting back to the way that our bodies have intended to consume and to eat and to thrive off of these foods. So the more whole plant-based you get, the healthier the carb will be, right? So the simple trick at all this is to think, when I'm putting something on my plate, is this the whole base form that it is, right? So if you're putting a burger on your plate, you ain't gonna go out in nature and see some burger trees. You see what I'm saying? if you're about to eat a big loaf of bread. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to eat. You can't eat any of this ever, because I totally indulge every now and then. But I'm talking about for 80 to 90% of the time, when you're eating and you're thinking about, okay, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to get back healthy, I'm trying to heal my adrenals, I'm trying to boost my energy. You want to start to lessen and try to avoid the processed carbohydrates, right? And processed means refined, when they strip away the nutrients from the actual whole plant-based food that it was originally intended to be eaten and consumed in, and they make it into some other pseudo food, okay? So you want to avoid pseudo foods and you want to eat real whole foods, right? So that's really the trick. Can you see this actual food that you're about to put in your mouth on a plant tree out in nature, right? Like if you eat some grains of rice, if you ever look at a picture of where they harvest rice and stuff, rice comes out of grain fields, right? So that's something that you can see in nature, right? Same thing with quinoa, stuff like that, right? So that's just the simple trick to help you, make healthy and positive decisions when determining whether a carbohydrate is healthy or whether a carbohydrate is unhealthy, right? Can you find it in nature, right? And so that's really just my tip really quickly. This is one of the things the quick tips that I wanted to share with you guys on this Wellness Wednesday, is to start to look at things from that perspective, from that lens, because so many times you'll see, oh, fortified, that was the word I was looking for, fortified, where they strip away the nutrients and then they try to refortify the food with all the nutrients that they stripped it away from, right? And the thing is, not all fortified foods are bad, right? But in general, when you think about, carbohydrates, when it comes to the carbohydrates, like the breads, the pastas, and all that kind of stuff, usually those foods are non-nutritional, right? Because they have basically taken the actual original form of the food and turned it into a pseudo food and tried to refortify it with certain nutrients. And so our bodies doesn't necessarily are able to tell what these foods are, because it has all these additives, these extra additives and substances and sometimes toxins that our bodies can't really process, right? And even within carbohydrates, you have different types of sugars or sweeteners that are just sort of there, right? And so there's like intrinsic sugars, and then there's the non-nutritive sugars, right? You want to avoid all the highly processed and artificial and added sugars as much as possible. So avoiding table sugar, all the alls, sorbitol, xylitol, all those alls that you might see listed in your ingredients, you want to avoid those, right? So any carbohydrates that have those products, you want to try to avoid. The high fructose corn syrup, I've talked about that several times in some of my other videos. I'll link up a video if I remember to afterwards. So that's really the simple trick to tell the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy carb. Can you find that carbohydrate, that thing that you're about to put in your body, that you're about to consume with your hands and put in your mouth? Can you find it in nature in the way that you're about to consume it? If you can't find it in nature, then try to avoid it as much as possible. So that's my tip for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching. And if you're looking for a coach to help you really thrive and to really take your health and well-being to the next level, visit me at divineearthschool.com/call to book a call with me, and so that you can start to thrive in your body and really take back the power over your health and well-being. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will chat with you guys soon. Peace of the light.